immediately. So
yeah, it seems to work really well. Twitch is integrated well like that. So how are you guys holding up? It's been like 10 hours, 8 hours so far?
It feels like we've been here for a few minutes.
it's been so.
Well,
it has been so
that's
much
positive,
fun.
I guess.
Yeah. At the same time, I am feeling a little loopy.
Yeah,
So.
I can imagine.
Yeah, a little bit out of it, a little bit like, but also kind of like, I feel like we just started like 5 minutes ago. I mean, it's just been, it blasted
every
right by.
time there's like a game switch, it's kind of refreshing and new and stuff.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I can imagine you are dealing with, like a couple dozen games today, so, you know, if it was like a marathon stream of the same game, it might get a little exhausting, but this way you get to keep the variety up a little bit.
Yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure playing all the games.
I can imagine. So how do we introduce this here? What should we do?
Is Kobe here?
Yes, I'm here as well as Ryan and Ryan, so the whole crew is here.
And
Oh,
Ryan,
cool.
myself as well.
Yeah.
Ryan,
So if you say hello, Ryan, then at least one of 3 people will answer you.
Right, it would be an issue. Let's a quick introduction here. I'm Northernlion. I'm joining the stream in the midst of the Greenlight SuperShow here, and we are going to be playing 3 games today in half-hour blocks, starting with the excellent Delver's Drop that a lot of you, if you're familiar with my channel, might be familiar with, or if you follow the landscape of dungeon crawlers or games with roguelike elements. This game made a huge splash when the Kickstarter campaign for it was up and successful back in March, I think? February?
Yeah, it ended mid-March.
Yeah, perfect. So why don't you guys introduce yourself?
Well, we're Pixelscopic, and yeah, I'm Ryan Baker. Just so everyone should get familiar with the voices, I guess.
I'm Kobe.
And I'm Ryan Burrell.
Awesome. So what do you guys do at Pixelscopic each, I guess?
What don't we do?
Okay, well...
Mostly not sleep, I think, is the key answer.
You know, I hear that from a lot of developers.
Yeah, it's like the indie curse.
So we're playing Delver's Drop. I meant like individually as opposed to collectively. Like I'm sure at Pixelscopic you do the development for Delver's Drop, of course. But what does Ryan, and Kobe do?
I do all the programming, this Kobe. All the programming and banging my head against the wall constantly. So that's me.
I think you're just having a little PTSD from the last few days. But this is Ryan Baker. I do a lot of the art and a bit of game design.
And Ryan, number 3, Ryan Burrell, I do a lot of the level setup, scripting, and kind of any of the other loose ends that might be hanging around.
Awesome. And is it just you 3 guys?
Well, we have a lot of contractors. So we probably have like 10 people total off and on, but we're the only 3 who are full-time.
Ah, cool. So for people who aren't familiar, Delver's Drop, we're playing the PAX East build of it. So this is a little bit, I assume, outdated by this point, but this is the last like stable press-ready build, I suppose. And we're playing the Endless mode, which basically, if I remember correctly, our goal here is just going to be to amass as much gold as possible, and I forgot that the rats exploded, and get as far as possible. Is this, more or less correct?
Yep, that's correct. This is the PAX East build. It's right now we're in the throes of development, so this is actually the most polished build we have. Yeah, endless drop mode, just don't die. Well, that's inevitable. So
yeah,
try not to
Go as deep as you can.
Yeah, well, that's my advice for basically everything in life. Now, I died pretty early on here, but I'm starting to get my Delver's Drop foo back, I think. I had you guys on the stream way back in March, back when I was half decent at this game, but I'm like losing my edge here, or I've lost my edge, and I'm starting to get it. Oh, this is dangerous.
Are you a controller or keyboard person?
I am almost always a controller person, much to the chagrin of my audience, so I'm using the Xbox 360 controller right now. Whether that puts me at an advantage or a disadvantage, I'm not totally sure.
I don't know. That would probably depend on who you ask, and I don't know if we want to start that argument.
So why don't we talk about the saga of Delver's Drop, like the story that you guys have had, starting with I guess when development started and going through to the Kickstarter campaign, and then in particular I'm interested in hearing like what's gone on with respect to your Greenlight campaign and what's happened since I talked to you guys last, like at the end of March, I guess it was when we talked.
Well, I'll give sort of the ancient history really quick and pass it off to the other guys to give the more recent story. So I think the earliest file I could find that was anything specifically Delver's Drop related was from December 2011.
Oh, wow.
So the idea was around for quite a while, but we couldn't actually start development on it. We had some pretty large kind of contract games that we were working on. That took most of 2012, but then we had some time to put together a pretty decent build over the course of a month or so, right before PAX Prime of 2012. So that was the first time we showed the game. It was kind of a stealth launch. We basically showed up, and it was awesome. And from there, we worked on a lot of additional features and got things prepped for the Kickstarter,
right,
which launched in February.
So since then, man, we've touched like everything in the game. Basically the build you're playing right now looks really nice in a lot of regards, but it's actually very crude behind the scenes. So we went back and revisited almost all of the fundamental systems, from like physics to graphics, and a huge one was actually animation. So at the end of the stream, when we showed the little video that we took earlier, it's actually going to show, basically, it's important to remember what the Rogue looks like now, because the Rogue is actually quite different. So really I've touched every part of the game. Right now, we have fallen prey to the typical any developer Kickstarter fallacy, which is we're going to deliver the first playable build to backers today, but we pushed that 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Because we're a bit behind, and what we're working on at this moment are the randomization systems, both for the dungeon and for the weapons and items. Speaking of, well, we'll get into items a little bit later.
Yeah, I did have a crossbow there, but I forgot to use it before I died. So my general rule of thumb should probably be to use it as soon as possible, because I'm not sure if I'm going to last long enough for it to really make a difference later on in my runs. So what are the principal differences, I guess, between the way the game looks now and the way that it's going to look in the video that we'll show a little bit later?
Well, this is actually a little bit more polished video. There's lots of effects and particles and whatever, but the Rogue itself has a lot of new stuff, which Ryan's gonna.
Yeah, I mean, I think basically the builds you're playing, like there were a lot of things that we did very quickly and in ways that aren't extensible for full development. So we animated the characters in Flash and just spit out a series of pings for all of the frames. So the Rogue had this huge texture sheet for all of his or her animations, and really we only had run and attack, and those filled up an entire texture sheet. But now we've switched to Esoteric Software's Spine to do animation. So we actually, the process of animating is very similar to what we did in Flash, but we're able to basically export everything as data, and now the Rogue, like we only have kind of pieces. So that it takes up like, an eighth of a texture sheet or something. So we're actually going to be able to load way more in terms of textures, like, add a lot more complexity, like things that, you can't see in the PAX build because there's not as much there as we're actually planning for the final release. Yeah. But, if we just kept adding, the game would probably run at like 2 frames a second and take an hour. So that's kind of been like, where we've been at for a bit is just like getting things all changed over to these new systems so it runs, hyper efficiently, and so that we could do things like, right now you couldn't actually swap the weapon in the Rogue's hand, but the new build you're going to see, you can do that, and we're actually working on the randomization properties for weapons so that, whatever weapon is generated could have a different blade from versus hilts, so all these pieces are kind of combined to make a single weapon out of like 4 or 5 components.
Oh, that's awesome.
That's
yeah. So that's at least what I've been, spending a decent bit of time on recently. But I did some polish to the Rogue character design and sprites, and plus, like I was saying, new animations and all of that. And we've been working on some new enemies as well. And now that our processes are pretty much solidified, we're going to start adding new enemies much more quickly.
Nice. Yeah, that is one of the things I noticed from the PAX East build, is that the enemy variety is a little bit low, but there's like so much potential for other enemies that you can toss into the game. that I expect it's going to get a little bit more hellish as time goes on. I mean, as is, I know you changed the ghost behavior, so they're a little easier to hit, but they are still like the bane of my goddamn existence every single time that I run into them.
Yeah.
And what I meant to say, sorry to interrupt, but what I just meant to say to interject when you were talking about like the graphics of the game, and particularly the frame rate, is that due to the streaming right now, you're seeing maybe a little bit of jitteriness. It's probably running at about 30 frames per second, but it runs like crystal smooth actually in the browser. Crystal smooth, silky smooth, crystal clear. It looks fantastic.
Crystal light. Wait.
It's a good way to put it, anyway. Yes. Yeah. So it looks much better. Not that it looks bad on the stream right now, but it looks much better when it's actually running natively, as is often the case.
Yeah, I mean, our goal is to optimize it so that, I mean, as long as your system specs are moderately decent, it should run at 60 all the time.
Yeah, I think
that's the start of our goal. So.
I hesitate to get into this discussion because I always make myself look like an idiot. I'm like, oh, that's running at 60 frames per second, and then someone's like, no, it's actually 30 or 15. But for me, yeah, it looks like it's running at 60 if the PAX build is capable of that.
Ooh, does that mean you're going to support Oculus Rift?
We have so many platforms to support already. Like, I don't even want to think about another one or an accessory or anything else.
It's okay, I was teasing.
It's a joke. I'm sorry. We've been talking about that for a while. And,
yeah, we just we kind of cringe anytime someone's like, "Could you please port to XYZ?" Like, we shudder.
Oh yeah.
I mean, not that we don't want to. It's just like so much to do.
Oh no. Yeah, absolutely.
And you guys did. You hit a stretch goal that got Linux support, right? If I remember.
Yeah. So we'll have Linux at launch, and then we'll have iOS, Android, and Ouya sometime around February.
No, that's awesome. So do you have an actual launch date for or a launch window, I guess, for the game itself? Because you're saying that alpha is going to be 2 weeks from now, roughly?
Yeah, the first alpha build is going to be almost exactly 2 weeks from now. And basically, we've pushed back the entire schedule. We wanted to release at the very end of October of this year. But for now, we're just pushing the entire schedule back 2 weeks. Hopefully, we make up some ground between now and then. Maybe not. We'll see.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, it's kind of the Kickstarter curse is that the best laid plans can always, fall to the wayside sometimes. Oh, I have found myself in kind of a nightmare room here. The thing that always gets me is I forget that the rats explode. Because that's such like a novel way to deal with these enemies that I always end up hitting myself with them. Do you guys have like a name for those turtle helmet looking guys?
Those are the goblins of our world. We've changed their official name like 5 times, so I can't remember what they are right now, but basically goblins.
Yeah.
And they're kind of the baby version, I guess, if you will.
Yeah. So we'll have like probably 3 or 4 different sizes or grades of goblins. So they'll kind of grow taller. Have real legs.
This
arms.
is the tadpole variety.
Yes.
So there are going to be like bigger versions later on.
Mm-hmm.
So I meant to ask, in the alpha version for backers, what kind of modes are going to be in that version? Is this going to be endless only, or is it going to consist of maybe other modes?
It will probably just be campaign only, actually. We might throw endless in there for fun, but right now our core focus is getting all of the systems up and running for the actual campaign mode, because that's where the majority of the work is going in.
And what's the structure of the game like in terms of, is the campaign, because there's obviously like randomized elements or procedural generated elements when it comes to the layouts of these rooms, but is the campaign like that, or is the campaign more kind of set?
It's randomized as well, and we have randomization for both like the actual physical layout of what you're going through, and then on a room by room basis as well. So it's going to be, I don't want to say impossible, but pretty unlikely that in any handful of playthroughs you'll probably receive the same room
Really?
twice. You may get rooms that have various elements that are kind of the same to them, but we can actually set randomization properties on stuff inside of an individual room on top of whether that room even exists to begin with at all. So
that was a typical death for me, as mentioned. I tried to run away from the explosion, but instead I got caught in the rat explosion. But why don't we take this time while we're at the kind of post-game splash here to encourage people to go vote for the game on Greenlight. I know Moobot in chat is constantly spamming the link in there, so definitely go through and vote for it. I know a lot of people kind of disparage, like, oh, I'm just one person, I can't have an effect on, like the video game industry. Well, voting on Greenlight is a very democratic way to give yourself some power and make sure that good games actually come out on major distribution platforms, which can make an absurd difference to the developers' lives, essentially. So, that's all I'm going to say is I would encourage you to go vote for it. It's free. And if you have any questions for the developers, I guess you can put those in the chat right now, and someone else in the call maybe can moderate those and send them out while I play through another round here.
Yeah, and our personal thanks to anyone that goes and votes for us. We really appreciate it. We've been moving up slowly but steadily, and we're
Yeah, currently I think this morning I checked and we're number 23.
Yeah.
That's
So,
really awesome.
Excellent.
Yeah, we're getting up there. The thing is, I think there's this massive gulf between like the mid-20s and the top 10.
Yeah.
Like almost as big as the
Yeah.
gulf as there is between the 20s and like being dead last.
Really?
So
Wow.
yeah, I think there's still a lot of hard work in front of us.
I think that was our we went all the way up to number 10, and the crawl to 10 took some time.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then you hear horror stories about sliding back down
Oh, yeah.
a couple dozen spaces, and let's just not talk about that.
Yeah.
Well, that's gotta be kind of like heartbreaking as you watch like a game kind of come out of nowhere and get a ton of buzz. You're like, oh, I'm really happy for you, but at the same time, could you have just waited like 2 months or something like that to like get this buzz?
Right.
Yeah.
We've got people asking about the music. They're curious about what's changed in the music since the build that Northernlion's playing, and also someone was asking about classes and bosses.
Yeah, and I was answering a few of those in chat, but I guess to elaborate a little bit, we're actually going to have 8 total classes in the game. So right now, and in this build, the only one that we're showing is the Rogue, but we're hoping to also have the Sorcerer in the Kickstarter Alpha that we release in a couple of weeks. And then at some point during Alpha or early Beta, we'll start adding additional classes. So the next one after that would be the Gladiator. And each class has kind of their own primary weapon emphasis and some special abilities or magic.
Cool.
And then for music, we've actually done a bit of rewriting to the track that's in the PAX build. So there's a lot more variety to it, and some just general kind of quality updates and that sort of thing. So, and I guess as far as bosses, there will be one for each of the 8 planned zones.
Okay.
We've also been naming the kind of behind the scenes, and I guess it'll show up to the alpha backers when they get the builds. But each build that rolls out has a kind of a cutesy name to it that is semi-descriptive of what's in that build.
Which I totally ripped off from Robot Loves Kitty.
Right.
So.
Well, thank you. I was gonna give you the chance to give
come
them,
clean.
to come clean and pay homage to where you ripped that off from.
Well,
I feel flattered. Thank you.
yes.
So our first one I think is Rogue Magic. Is that what we were going to call it? Or just, it's the Rogue plus the Sorcerer and then some other things like that. So.
In terms
So it
of
looks
the,
like
oh yeah, sorry. Are we running short on time? I actually don't have any kind of indication.
We have
of that.
about 10 minutes.
10 minutes, so that's fairly good.
All right, so maybe like one more death, and then I'll be able to show that video that you guys sent me to show off the new stuff that's on in the game, or maybe 2 more deaths because this room is looking a little bit scary for me.
You're at 6, and the record at PAX East was 23.
23?
That's
Yeah.
impressive.
Are you just trying to make him feel bad?
No, not at all.
I don't.
I think I got into the 20s actually when I was playing the game back in March or so. Okay, that was really close. But yeah, since then, obviously, I guess 6 is probably like my personal best. I think actually I might have hit 7 just before this one. All right, barely made that one. Of course, I missed like 20 items here as well, but survival is more important.
And Endless Drop is basically done at this point, so that's why the focus has been on the rest of the core campaign stuff. But we will be adding some stuff to this at some point in time where it's like kind of break rooms, if you can make it, say, to 20 or something like that. Maybe you've got a store that you can kind of stock back up. And I mean, it's definitely still going to be emphasis on, how long can you go, kind of the opposite direction of Limbo, I guess. But
Is there going to be like a narrative element to the campaign, or is it going to be more like, I guess, something like Spelunky, where it's just kind of like a set path to take through the game that frames it? There will be narrative elements to it, but it will be, I guess I would call it kind of overlaid on top of that, where they're not, it's not like you have, a whole bunch of like scripted sort of story stuff. A lot of it will just kind of happen within the randomization itself, so, yeah.
So there's also a new rule that if you're making a game like this, you have to have a merchant, and he has 3 items.
Yes.
Right. Yeah.
You can only get one of them. That's the rule.
Well, do you guys... Oh, no, I'm so close to death. I think I just destroyed the fire of this ghost with my sword, which I don't think I've ever done before. Or maybe I just absorbed it with my face. It's kind of hard to tell.
It is possible. I don't know what we set them to, but I know that there are some projectiles that you can kind of swat out of the air if you're nimble enough, so...
That was basically for me just like fast twitch firing on the A button, thinking I was going to die, so I might as well try to have some influence at the end.
Yeah.
What I meant to ask is, what do you guys have planned for items? Because so far in this build, I know there's the bombs and the crossbow, and I think there was some kind of a staff or a wand or something, but what else do you guys have planned for the alpha and later the final version?
Items are going to be differentiated from, I mean, weapons are kind of their own thing by themselves, and actually a lot of what is in the build you're playing right now are technically what will be weapons,
okay.
The crossbow and that kind of thing. But then we'll have other types of items that are either, they can confer some sort of like passive bonus to you, or, will allow you to access certain rooms that maybe you wouldn't otherwise have been able to if you weren't carrying that item, and stuff like that. So, to use your own, kind of frame of reference, more like the kind of auxiliary stuff that the Binding of Isaac has.
Ah, okay, yes.
That kind of deal. So.
Now you're speaking my language.
Yeah. So, yeah, you're my hero on that because you've got just a ridiculous amount of time spent on it. Because I thought that I did at one point in time.
Yeah, it's really just a silly amount of time.
Yeah, my measly 250 hours just whimpers before the greatness of your 8,000.
Well, actually, only 400. Which it's remarkable. Sometimes people will be like, "Well, I have 2,000 hours in the Binding of Isaac," and I'm like, "God." There's people out there with literally 5 times as many hours as I have in the Binding of Isaac. Let me know when we get down to the 3-minute mark so I can put that video on.
Oh, yeah. Well, there might be a bit of stuff to talk about too afterwards. Do you want him to... That's up to you, Kobe. So, whatever you guys want to do.
You can do it whenever you feel like you want to. I don't know how much discussion there will be. Maybe people will love it, maybe they'll hate it. So if they hate it and we do it later, then there's less time for us to defend ourselves. So.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, I guess. I lived a lot longer than I anticipated I would. I think it's because you told me that the PAX East record was 23 floors.
just that kind of subconscious, boost right there to your morale.
But of course, now that I've lampshaded it, I'll probably die in the next room. So let's give it a second here. I really like the way the physics work and the way you can use the physics to actually destroy the enemies, or yourself oftentimes as well.
Yeah, we definitely want to amp that up, especially with new weapons and things like that. The big kind of differentiators between weapons are, obviously there will be a bit of damage differentiation, but we really want to emphasize the physics and weapon attack speed, which is what we'll see in the video. But yeah, so a mace will knock enemies much farther, across a room than a small sword would, for instance.
That's really cool. Is it gonna work like that for classes as well, or I guess what you should ask first is classes like the sorcerer or the mage. Is there any way that they'll be able to wield a melee weapon, or are they kind of the weapon is coded into the actual class itself?
Yeah, any class can wield any weapon, but there are some limitations. So, and there are some things that we're still trying to kind of figure out for balancing and all of that. But basically, yeah, a wizard could pick up a mace, but they will most likely be much slower to swing it. So there's kind of a wind-up speed and a speed that the swing actually occurs. Mm-hmm. And it will be limited uses. So the idea is that, a rogue doesn't really know how to use a wand, and a sorcerer doesn't really know how to use a mace. Okay. And so they basically kind of break it or dent it up when they use it. And so, yeah, they may only have 5 uses before they... Yeah.
And is it going to be the mace is going to be just one weapon that's always got exactly the same characteristics and attributes, or is it going to be you can find a super mace or something like that?
Yeah, almost all weapons and probably most items will feature some degree of randomization. So there will be much more randomization on the weapons actually than probably items. But yeah, we're actually coming up with a list of kind of randomized parameters right now. Mm-hmm. So I guess a comparison would be how Diablo has kind of the prefix and suffix
Yes.
terms that they get attached to a weapon name. So that's kind of our mentality, but we're trying to make it pretty unique to our game, I guess, in terms of like how things are named and kind of what those things do.
You know what's really...
Guys are down.
Just
You're down to the wire.
Yeah, it's 3 minutes.
Okay,
so
perfect. I will.
just to let you know.
I will hit the button.
You need like a giant buzzer
to send the
or something.
pixelscopic thing. And let me load up the video here, which might take a brief moment, but this makes for a convenient splash anyway. Are you guys hearing that music? Where's this music coming from? I have like a nice kind of smooth jazz going on right here. Is that from the Delver's Drop intro?
Did you put smooth jazz into the
I
video?
don't know, maybe.
All right.
Interesting.
Give me one moment here. I did just get the video mere moments before we started. So I'm going to put this up over here and then set it up to work with my screen region, and we'll run it, and you guys can talk over top of it. And it should be up right about now. But you won't see it on Twitch for, I guess, like another 3 or 4 seconds. But the video has started playing.
Oh, there we go.
Is there, you guys have like narration or a description to mention here, or are we just going to...
Yeah, so you now see the updated design for the rogue running around there a little bit. The weapon in its hand is totally like dynamically loaded, so you'll probably see, and right now there's no UI, so you'll probably just see the weapon kind of pop and turn into other weapons. So you can see how this is a pretty quick little dagger, and then we'll get to the mace and possibly an axe in a minute here. But yeah, there we go. So I'm not sure how much of a delay this is on.
it's probably like 5 seconds, if I had to guess.
Yeah. So the axe is much slower, has more reach. So the range of the weapons in terms of their collision box is actually kind of based on the weapon size, and that all integrates with the random system. So you might actually get a sword or dagger at random that has a bit more range, or you might get a mace that has a huge range, that looks like this but has a much longer handle, so to speak, on it.
Mm-hmm. You're also seeing one of the new kind of primary combat mechanics, which is strafing. So effectively, if you hold down the attack button, you go into sort of charge state. And when you're in that state, you maintain the same facing direction and you move quite a bit slower.
Okay.
If you have a shield, it will actually bring up the shield for some frontal defense in that state as well. So there's a bunch of different, like, sort of subtle but also kind of visually apparent things going on. But yeah.
So you can wield the shield and a weapon simultaneously?
Yep.
Okay, cool. Is there like a one-handed and two-handed weapon system? Oh man, that enemy scares the bejesus out of me, actually. The weird crab spider.
Yeah, that's not cool.
Oh yeah. Oh, those are creepy.
We haven't planned for kind of one-handed versus two-handed, but there will be like very large, like weapons that would traditionally be two-handed will actually just operate much slower, but have a wider sweep. So like a long sword or a claymore would sweep much farther around to hit more enemies than say a small dagger would.
All right, sweet.
Do you guys have anything else you wanted to add before you get switched over to the next game?
No, thank you very much for having us. We're definitely very happy to have the opportunity, so hopefully we didn't bore the scores of viewers that you guys have amassed.
No, I don't think so.
Most of those are from Northernlion, so.
You're too kind.
I hear he's a popular guy. I don't know, but
He has a soothing voice, So.
And we should finish this off by encouraging people again, especially if they've just joined us, to follow the links in the chat from the moderators and OPs to go vote for Delver's Drop on Greenlight.
Yeah, thanks.
Indeed.
We definitely appreciate it.
Yep, your votes matter, so definitely do it.
Yeah, absolutely. You heard them say you guys were in the top 20 at this point, or I guess the top 30 technically.
yeah, number 23.
Yeah, number 23. So getting close to the end, and the alpha for Kickstarter backers coming in 2 weeks, and the final game looking like maybe November.
Yep, November right now.
Awesome.
So just as a plus to you guys, I've heard people some people have been greenlit up in the 20s. So.
Oh yeah, you have a chance at this point.
It's
You're definitely up in the
possible
thinking
zone.
territory.
Yeah, it's actually interesting. We were before this last batch of games that got greenlit just a couple days ago. We were 20. We were at 24, but we dropped to 27, and then we jumped to 23. But they greenlit 7 games, so I assume there had to be 3 games behind us that actually jumped us. But yeah, from what I gather, that happens quite a bit.
Yeah, there's no complete logic to what they're doing.
Well,
that we know of.
there's no visible logic.
Yeah.